Hi, my name's Hazem, and today we're going to look at tools. What kind of tools do you need to be a Sparky? So, we'll start with hand tools. Now, these are called dikes or diagonal cutting pliers, and they're used in really tight spots where other pliers don't fit. So you can see the blade is angled and they can cut really close. And they usually have an insulated handle. The second set of pliers you need are locking pliers, and they've got on one side a screw, so you can clamp down on these and then tighten the screw and they'll stay tight. And they've got this handle here on the inside to retract. And then you'll need your linesman. So the linesman is a big tough plier, and it's got a cutting blade, and it's also got jaws that are really tough, which are good for twisting wires together. So if you're twisting like a really thick wire or with a maret, also known as a wire nut, you can use that. This also works. It's also got this portion right here for stripping, I think, and crimping. And then we have, these are my favorites. You got the needle nose, which are good for bending loops on the end of a wire. You can also cut or strip. Don't strip wire with a needle nose. We'll talk about that later. But yeah, you can technically, but you shouldn't. You can bend a loop on the end of the wire, and you can also use it for like positioning stuff. And then everybody calls these channel locks because the company that makes them is called Channel Locks, or Channel Lock. But they're also known as pump or lock nut pliers, and they only designed to work in one direction, so you have to turn it counterclockwise when you're pulling against the handle with the shorter jaw. So this handle. So when you're pulling this way, you can turn it this way. Cannot turn it this way. Now these are adjustable, so the width of the jaw can be adjusted. And then you'll need a screwdriver. Now screwdrivers come in different lengths, and you've got flat, Robertson, and Phillips. So the flat one's like a dash, and a Phillips is a plus, and a Robertson is a square. So those are the tips, and then you've got different sizes, you've got different lengths, and you've got different materials. And then we've also got wrenches. Now, a box wrench is offset by 15 degrees, and that lets us turn uh, a nut in 15-degree increments really tight. Whereas we got a 12-point wrench, which allows us to turn a bolt in 30 degrees. So here's a wrench. These are adjustable wrenches. You can get them in different lengths and different jaw sizes. Sometimes you gotta get the jaw really tight around the bolt so that you can fit snug or it won't turn. Now you want the longer the wrench handle, the more torque you can deliver, but a really big wrench on a small bolt could like rip the bolt right out. Could snap the head right off. So you want to pick a wrench based on what you can fit and also the amount of force you've got to apply. And then we've also got pipe wrenches. So these are again choose according to length and the size of the pipe diameter. But the longer the wrench, the more force you can put. And then these are called Allen keys. Now you can get these separately, or you can get them as like screwdriver bits, or you can get them as a set. And if you get them as a set, then you won't lose them. So these, I don't really like these because they're kind of bulky. because you pick, it's like a Swiss Army knife, and you got to pick the one that you want and then try to use it. You can get them in sets where their keys are removable, but which are a lot better, I think. Now there are metric sizes and there's imperial sizes. So there's for everything, but especially for the hex sets. And these are very, very important, especially when working on equipment. A lot of different, um, like you won't see screws with hex heads, but you'll see a lot of like machine screws or set screws in equipment that's got a hex head. And then you'll need a hacksaw. So a hacksaw is what we use to cut conduit or tubing, like EMT or ENT or PVC. And the blade, so this is the blade. The blades are replaceable. They just sit on the saw. You just loosen this latch, and then that loosens the tension on the blade, and then you can take the blade out. Now, you want to know that there's different types of blades. So the the set of the blade is how thick the blade is, and then the pitch is how many teeth per inch you've got. Now you've got really like two options here. So you've got a coarse blade which has like 18 teeth per inch, so really big teeth, and that's good for thick material. And you can cut really fast through thick material with really big teeth. If you use a fine blade like 32 teeth per inch, then the cutting will clog the blade and you'll have to remove the blade from your work and clean it off and do it again and again. A fine blade is good though for thin material. So when you're cutting, make sure your blade is sharp and saw really close to the point of clamping and let the saw do the work. So you want to cut downward and just push down. When you're pulling back up, don't put as much pressure. And two teeth will be in contact with the work at any time, at least. So when you're almost at the end of your cut, though, you want to be careful. And now we need chisels and punches. So these are optional, but like if you've got a wood chisel, you can get a wood chisel for wood, and a cold chisel can cut steel and concrete. It's gotta be sharpened though, but nobody really uses chisels that much. Punches are great though. So a punch, if we've got a really um like a flat piece of metal and we're trying to drill a hole in it, what'll happen is the drill bit will tend to slip. So it'll scratch up the metal and it won't make the hole exactly where we want it to. So what we do is we get a punch, and the punch punches a hole right in the metal, tiny hole, and then our drill bit will fit right in the hole without slipping. So these are actually really useful. And then we're going to learn about these. So this is what's called a knockout punch, and it lets us cut a hole in sheet metal. So most commonly, when we're installing electrical panels or transformers, we'll want to use a punch, and it's much cleaner than a hole saw. So we choose the there's this attachment basically, and it's got like a pump, and then we choose um, the hole, the size that we want, and we attach this to the hydraulic pump, and we clamp it onto, let's say, the side of the electrical panel where we're putting our conduit through, and we just pump it, and it just makes a hole right there. So if we want a 1 inch hole or 2 inch hole or whatever size we want, we just use that. So these are extremely, extremely handy. They're way better than than a hole saw. Hole saws are always give you sharp edges, and they're not perfect. Although you can get away with a hole saw sometimes, and you can get away. A lot of panels have knockouts, so depending on how many conduits you need to put in knockouts, existing knockouts might work. And then we need a file. So there's 4 profiles files. One's a flat one, which is like a rectangle, and then so this one's a rectangular. We've also got a square file, which is much smaller than this one, and then we've got a round file and a half round. Sometimes you'll see a file will have one flat side and one half round side. So you want to choose one that's got the right shape and size, and the round file is used for holes with a small radius. And then you'll need a measuring tape. So measuring tape, I don't have to explain what that does, but you can get one with a laser, or you can get a laser guided measuring tape, and these come in different lengths. So sometimes you can get like a 12-foot length that fits in your pocket. You can get a 25-foot length, and then you've also got the level, which can tell you if it's level, and you've got a number of different lengths of levels. So if you're doing an installation, you may want to use a really big level, or you may want to use a laser level. Especially if you're lining up a lot over a long distance, you probably want to use a laser. A level isn't gonna cut it. And then you'll need a drill bit. So we got different kinds of drill bits, and these ones are wooden drill bits, it looks like, but we've got different types of drill bits of different sizes. And then over here we've got what we call a step bit. So the step bit lets us so a standard drill bit has a size, so it could be an eighth of an inch, half inch, all the way up to an inch, for example. So when you drill a hole, you want to choose the right size bit, and you want to see what kind of material you've got, because you've got wood. So these are standard wood drill bits. Now, if you're making a hole in concrete, you want a concrete bit. And a concrete bit looks just like a wooden drill bit, but it's kind of got like a chiseled end at the top. It kind of looks like a T, because concrete drills don't just spin; they also hammer. Because concrete is hard to drill through. It's kind of got some jackhammer action. Now, these are pretty cheap. The metal drill bits have like a titanium coating, so they'll be yellow. So this step drill bit's titanium. These are super expensive, so you gotta be careful with them. But like this one, each step is a different size hole. So you can use this to drill a hole, and you can just stop at whatever depth you want, and that'll give you the hole size. So if you can stop at the top, you'll make a hole that's say a quarter of an inch, and if you go down here, you made a hole that's like half an inch, and then an inch, and then 2 inches. So you have one bit that can just do everything. Now, if you're gonna be tapping, so if you're trying to make a hole to put a machine screw in, so you're trying to make threads in the hole, then you gotta use a tap for that, and you gotta drill a hole that's smaller than a tap, and we're gonna see that later. So here's another type of bit. This one is an auger bit, and it can also be used for wood, but it's designed so that it's kind of hollow, so the wood shavings will come out while we drill. so it doesn't clog up the drilling process. Now remember I said we could use a that hydraulic, what's it called? A knockout punch right here, but we can also use a hole saw. So hole saws are also really expensive, and they come in different types depending on if you're drilling through wood or metal or even drywall. So the hole saw will come with a chuck, which is like this piece at the bottom. So you can buy a hole saw kit typically, and the kit will have different sized hole saws depending on what you're making. You can get these all the way up to like a foot wide, foot diameter. But you put the chuck into the hole saw that you want, and you just drill a hole with it, and then now you'll notice they got this groove in here because what'll happen is the material that you've cut, it'll wind up in the hole saw. So you got like a wood plug or a drywall plug. Sheet metal doesn't really do it too much, but you'll want to take a screwdriver or something, and you'll have to pop that core out so this will be empty so you can use it again. And you'll be careful because these get really hot while you're drilling, so you'll want to not touch them. Now, as I was saying, here's a tap. So a tap makes a thread, and so if we want to if we want to put a screw into a material that doesn't have threads, we can use a like a sheet metal screw or a wood screw. But sometimes we're mounting equipment and we don't want that tight fit too, so we can use a machine screw, which is not pointed. But in order to do that, we have to cut threads into the material. So the tap is designed to make threads in a hole. So a pipe tap, for example, now we've got different taps. So a machine tap, for example, makes what's called a straight thread, which means the hole has the same diameter all the way through. Now, that's good for standard screws, but if we're threading two pipes together, for example, like with rigid conduit, then we have a tapered thread, so it gets narrower towards the bottom. And that way, when we twist two pipes together with threads, the twisting action with the taper, they get tighter towards the bottom and they'll lock together. So these are usually there's three types of taps. There's the standard plug taps, and then we've got bottoming taps, which are used in a blind hole, which means when we can't see to the end of when we're not drilling all the way through the material. And then we've got the tapered taps, as I said before. Now here, so you make a hole with your drill bit, and then you stick this in. You pick the right size, and you just twist it. But you gotta be careful. You gotta do this really straight, or it won't give you good results. Now we can, of course, this is called a tri-tap, and it's got three different size taps on the same shaft. So you want to drill a big enough hole for this to fit and line it up, and then reverse it and twist it in reverse to remove accumulated material. And you want to use cutting oil to lubricate this as well, so it doesn't get too dull. Now, these aren't popular, but you can get a drill in either 1/4 inch, 3/8, or 1/2 inch size, which tells us how big of a bit we can put in. So try to get a drill with a 1/2 inch chuck, because a 1/2 inch chuck can fit any size drill bit. And then most, like your standard DeWalt or Milwaukee drills now, they have a hammer drill action, so they can drill into concrete. Can't drill into concrete with a regular drill because it doesn't have the hammering action. So a hammer drill is hitting the concrete, hitting the material at the same time as drilling. So now this is a large hammer drill, but you can get hammer drill functionality is available on standard size drills. So this one has a second handle to let you hold on to it tightly. And these hammer drills, they use only a certain style of drill bits that got a certain shape. So the chuck, it's not a twist to lock. It just it snaps in sort of. So you pull this chuck back to lock the drill bit in. Now we can use a cordless drill. You probably want to use a cordless drill. And when you think about what kind of tools you want to buy, most people either use DeWalt or they use Milwaukee. And they're both good brands, but you want to stick with one brand because um, they've got each. DeWalt's got like 200 cordless power tools now. They've got circular saws, lights, grinders, drills, reciprocating saws, circular saws, everything you can think of, and they all use the same battery. So if you're on a big job site, you might have 20 tools and 100 batteries, and you have one battery charger that can charge like 6 batteries or whatever. So batteries are interchangeable and tools are interchangeable, and that makes your life really easy. If you buy a whole bunch of different tools from a whole bunch of different brands, then you have a whole bunch of different batteries as well. So that's a mess. So like I said, you may need a jigsaw or a reciprocating saw if you're cutting. A jigsaw has a guide on it, so um, it's really precise. Reciprocating saw is terrible. It's good for demolition. It's not so good. It's terrible for finished work. A lot of people use it for cutting conduit, but you can use a conduit cutter instead if you want a clean cut and not worry about like deburring. And then you'll need a conduit bender. So conduit benders bend conduit. Now, if you don't want to bend conduit, then you have to buy conduit. Conduit comes in straight sticks, and then you can buy fittings. So you can buy elbows and like 90 degrees and 45 degrees, but it's not really practical, especially if you're doing a lot of conduit work. You can't always get the right dimensions with fittings, so you gotta bend it where you need to bend it, especially like if you're making an offset for an electrical box. So you'll want to bend your conduit, and you use now these come in different sizes depending on the size of the conduit that you're bending, but you can't really bend more than 1 1/4 inch conduit by hand. After that, you need um, a hydraulic bender, which is really expensive. So you might buy it or you might rent it depending on the size of your job. And like I said, so here's a machine that bends conduit automatically. Now this one's hydraulic, so you just put the conduit in and you pump it and it bends. And this one's electric, so it's got a wheel and you put the conduit in and it work it through and it bends. And this one can do like 4 different sizes automatically. So, but this is in the neighborhood of $20,000 to $30,000. So you might rent it if you. It's also really heavy. Now remember, we've got our conduit and we've got dies and we've got threads. So a die can form a thread on the outside of a rod or conduit, and we can use metric or we can use national coarse sizes for bolts, which is American, but we can also use a fine thread, which is not really common. And then conduit threads are used what's called the national pipe thread, which is a standard sized thread. Remember now that if we're doing a conduit like a rigid conduit, the threads have to be tapered. But if we're threading for a threaded rod, they're straight. So here's kind of what we do. We got this thing called the tri-stand, and the tri-stand, um, and plumbers use these too. So plumbers use them, sprinkler technicians use them. Everybody, it's the same thing. And so if we're putting threads on a rigid pipe, we just it's got this chain, and this is like a vise basically for our pipe, but it doesn't crush the pipe. So we put our pipe in the stand, and this is a dirty job because you gotta oil up that pipe. So you got a little um, sometimes it looks like a small watering can, or it looks like the light you see in your car when you got low oil. And so then we got our pipe cutter. So this thing cuts our pipe to the length that we want. So what we do is it's got two sharp blades, and we put our pipe right here between the blades, and then we tighten the handle, and then we rotate this around the pipe, and each time we rotate, we turn the handle a little bit, and the blades get tighter until we've cut through the pipe. Once we've got a clean cut, now if we want to put the threads on the outside of the pipe, then we put this die. So this die has replaceable heads, and we get the head for the size of pipe that we want, and then we've oiled up the end, and we put this around the pipe, so the pipe goes through this hole, and then we just turn the handle. This handle only turns one way. It's ratcheting. So when we turn it clockwise, it's cutting threads, and we turn it counterclockwise, it just releases. And you wanna turn it until the pipe has come out of the other end. So it's a lot of work. It's a lot of elbow grease. Now they also make automatic threaders um that don't use any elbow grease, like this one. So this is a power threading machine. It is way better. You just put your pipe in, you adjust the setting to whatever, or you change the threads in here, and and then you push the button, and it cuts the threads for you. It's also got an attachment here to cut through the pipe, and also the reamer to clean it out. But this is much, 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 much easier. It's got no physical labor. Now, you'll also need a fish tape. So fish tape lets you pull cables through a raceway or a conduit. And so the way that you do that is, so typically you got a few things you can do when you got a conduit. So these fish tapes come in different lengths, up to like 250 feet. And you just shove this in the conduit, and with this handle turns, and as it turns, it ejects more tape. So when you turn it clockwise, it's feeding tape into the conduit, and then when you turn it counterclockwise, it's pulling back. I am gonna stop here, and we're gonna start a new segment on fish tape.